So we are entering into the sixth session today of what we started as Ambedkar economics, and we have covered a lot of important topics in the course of last five sessions. Today, as a culmination of a course, we are going to talk about Buddhist economics, and we have with us Mrunal, who is going to begin her presentation, and I will follow up from there after she presents presentation. I reckon that this is going to be a little bit long session, maybe another 20 plus minutes than our usual sessions. And I'm sure that you will have a very enriching experience when we dive deep into the Buddhist economics in particular and Babasaheb's views on economics, how they can converge together with the Buddhist economics. So that part I will be talking about. So we will invite Mrunal to make her presentation. Her brief bio is like this. She is graduated in BSc Economics honors, and she has an MSc International Business from the University of Birmingham. And currently she is pursuing her PhD in management with a focus on Buddhist economics from the University of Birmingham, UK. She is also working as a lecturer of business studies at Global Banking School, Bath Spa, University, UK. And she's also an academic advisor and lecturer of Buddhist studies at the Research Center for Pali and Buddhist Studies, UK. And she's also founder of the Dhamma Renaissance, a website that focuses on modern Buddhism. So I would like to request Mrunal to begin her presentation.
Okay, yeah. Can you share the screen, please?
Yeah. Okay, Mrunal.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me and for asking me and giving me this opportunity to share this understudied field of Buddhist economics. So, to begin with, Buddhist economics as a field over the years have created some kind of attractions and forced economists and scholar to think about it. Yet, however, it is still understudied. So, Buddhist economics is highly contested and debatable field to venture into because, first and foremost, how does such concept even exist? And even if it does, then is there even a pragmatic possibility of its application? Secondly, we are linking a spiritual religion which was perceived before to a very new model of economics which deals with finances, which deals with numbers and statistics. And because at present the economics which we are acquainted is a Western economic or is a Western concept, and in some papers we might also come across the Western economic model as a mainstream economic model. So the entire debate then starts with how exactly this Buddhist economics came into surface. What exactly made an economist to bring Buddhist economics to the mainstream economics? So to start with, the initial trailblazer of Buddhist economics was E.F. Schumacher. So he was a German-born British economist, who was highly influenced by the Keynesian school of economics. So during 1950s, he was working with UN, and he was asked to visit Burma, which is present-day Myanmar, to teach the government about Western economics and ideas of development, which was perceived in Western society. But within 3 months of its stay there, he got to know that Burma does not need any Western economic models because they have their own, which Schumacher was very much fascinated of that work. And the model which he thought was fascinating was working effectively and efficiently in Burma. So rather than giving Burma or Myanmar the economic model of Western society, he took their economical model and brought that back to UK. And this particular model was then termed as Buddhist economics, according to his book. So when he brought that back to European countries, his suggestions were, of course, rejected by many prominent scholars like Max Weber and Verma, who do not believe or who do not understand that Buddhism can also have an intrinsic understanding of how the economical system works, because according to them, Buddhism or any religion for that matter should not indulge into the development side of the society. So, however, in the mid 70s, he published a book called Small is Beautiful, and the fourth chapter of which dealt with the subject of Buddhist economics. So, this book as a whole speaks about Buddhist economics. However, this particular chapter gave East and West, like both the scholars of East and West, an interest in those subjects to venture more into it, to speak more about how economy can also change the entire trajectory and paradigm of the mainstream economics, which was already present. However, it was noted that the writing of Small is Beautiful and subsequent interest in Buddhist economics shown by Western academia was a crisis response. So it wasn't not only about to resurface Buddhist economics as a whole, uh, but a stream to find an alternative model which Western economy was not able to find out, or which Western economy was not able to deal with it. So, and also at that time, when Western academia and conceptual structures were reaching to a point where they were not able to proceed further, and it was a dead end, and it was not returning back, and therefore demanding a new paradigm of thought and methodology was a new response which Buddhist economics gave. I think the presentation has stopped.
1 minute. Just give 1 minute.
Yeah.
Wait. Just 1 minute. I don't know something. Share. Mm. Yeah, what is happening? Wait, 1 minute. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think this third slide. Yes. Yeah, so referring back as to what I said about Small is Beautiful and the trailblazer E.S. Kumasher, who resurfaced the entire idea of Buddhist economics. However, in his book, there are certain points to have a critical understanding or have a critical view as to what exactly did he refer as Buddhist or as Buddhism, and what exactly did he infer a Buddhist economics as a new paradigm, or as something which is necessary for the world, or for the Western, as a I think as an antithesis to a Western economical model. So, in his particular work, he did focused more on natural capital rather than social capital, and most of the Buddhist studies are more and more focused on social capital. However, when he speaks about natural capital, he is also implicitly mentioning noble eightfold path and specifically factors of right livelihood. And his entire argument was just because just because Buddhism have right livelihood as one of the main concept, as and as one of the main values of Buddhism, there has to be something related to Buddhist economics. So to make his case, however, it possesses a restricted view of holistic nature of Buddhist economics altogether. Now, again, E.F. Schumacher, who was an economist himself, was very much against the idea of quantitative and statistical analysis, which in a way is understandable, because when economics speaks more about statistics and speaks more about quantitative methodology, they do not consider the other social factors which are not quantifiable but plays a very important role in society. However, any economical model, if is an antithesis to a current economical system which has been working for several years, it has to be backed up with some kind of evidence-based argument. It has to be backed up by some kind of numbers or some kind of statistics to prove that this particular economical model can actually work. And to understand that whether Buddhist economical model can actually work or not, want to work, is still a questionable thing, because most of the studies have focused more on theoretical aspect rather than practical implications, or rather than exploring the practical side of application of such models. His particular work has, of course, was a stir in Buddhist economics and made many Buddhist scholars and economists to start dwelling more in depth into this. So this is when P.A. Payutto, or we also can say as Venerable Payutto, who is one of the well-learned Theravada Buddhist scholar from Thailand, and he also won UNESCO Peace Prize for Education, wrote a book, Buddhist Economics, a Middle Way for Marketplace, where he linked Buddhist economic principle with Buddha Vachana. So his entire argument was related to Dhamma. So he did say that we everything we connect with economics stems from Dhamma, because first of all, Dhamma is the ultimate truth. It is the natural truth. It is something which is acceptable not just for Buddhists but for any society or any creatures working. Secondly, when we see that E.F. Schumacher spent just 3 months in Burma, so although he had a very extensive understanding of economics, however, his understanding of Buddhism is still questionable, and that's when Payutto came into picture, where he linked each and every aspect of economics with Buddha Vachana as to what exactly Buddha said and what exactly Buddha implied when he was speaking about economics or governance or finance in that matter. And after this, a few scholars around the globe started glancing over various aspects of Buddhist economics. So some focused on comparison of how exactly the difference between Western economics and Buddhist economics is. They also spoke about some of the basic understanding of what we perceive as Western economics, and whether this particular perception of Western economics is acceptable or is not acceptable. And secondly, what exactly is Buddhist economics according to, of course, Pali Canon? Now, there were another such scholars who did some field work and mainly on microeconomics and macroeconomics. So, another such scholars was Wangchuk and Shubha. So, in 2020, they did a systematic literature review of 66 articles. So, they focused on 66 articles which were speaking about Buddhist economics or Western economics, and they linked that with another independent variables like well-being, happiness, and global issues. So they got to know that to have a proper working of global issues and to form a solution for these global issues, it is necessary to link Buddhist economics and Western economics all together. Secondly, there is another such scholar known as Thomas Lenfors, who says that Buddhist economics is basically the future of capitalism. So, which in a way implies that Buddhist economics has a potential to be a paradigm shift. Buddhist economics is not just something which has been told by 2,600 years ago by a person who got nirvana, but it is something which can be used in 21st century and which can be used contemporary to us and contemporary to the current economical model, because there has been an evidence and there has been a discussion in economic academia that current economical model is not well equipped enough to answer each and every crisis, and there is a lagging within it. And most of the arguments based on Buddhist economics are focused on the counter capitalism, are focused on how capitalism is not good for the society, and how Buddhist economics can ensure that this particular aspect or this issues within capitalism does not happen by having more Buddhist ethics and Buddhist principles into picture. But then, even with all this discussion of scholarly and academic and all these papers which has been written, the question still remains as to what exactly is Buddhist economics, and what exactly did Buddha speak about Buddhist economics. So to start with, there is not a set, clear definition of Buddhist economics. But but if to provide a definition, it won't be wrong to say that economics has been said to be the most scientific of social sciences. And indeed, economists are proud of how scientific their subject is, that they take only those things which can be measured and quantified into consideration. They focuses on assumption, they focuses on rationality, which we know that the rationality of human behavior does not exist. We act irrationally. However, the entire concise of assumption of economics is humans behave rationally, which again Buddhist economics do not believe in. Secondly, economics also asserts that it is purely a science of numbers, a matter of mathematical equation. So in its effort to be a science, economics try to eradicate all other questions of abstract values as unquantifiable and seek to be value free. So this is because economics has isolated itself from other disciplines, whereas Buddhist economics so whereas Buddhist economics, it focuses more on holistic view. So it says that Buddhist economics do not just focuses on Buddhism or studies of Buddhism, but it also speaks about philosophy. It speaks about history. It speaks about sociology and so on and so forth. So it shows a holistic view of how society and interconnectedness works. So when economics aligns with Buddhism, forming Buddhist economics, it transcends being an individualistic science. Instead, it becomes a collaborative effort where an independent disciples work together towards a shared objectives of promoting social, individual, and environmental well-being. And furthermore, when we speak about what exactly Buddha said, no one can be sure as to what exact words of Buddha's were. However, if we refer back to Pali Canon, we do come across various instances where Buddha has spoken about economics and governance while connecting it with ethics. So the first and foremost is, of course, the Noble Eightfold Paths and Four Noble Truths, which are the main arguments of most of the scholars, saying that those who are supporting Buddhist economics, saying that because Buddhism has Eight Noble Truths and Four Noble Paths, it has a lot of understanding of economics, and the basic of understanding of economics is this two discourse. So, however, if we venture more and to more discourse where Buddha is said to have been providing a lot of economical wisdoms. So, the first is Karniya Mitta Sutta. So, in that, Buddha has focused on social values of an individual that is important to engage in economical activities and continue day-to-day living. Another one is Adhamika Sutta, where he focuses on how righteousness and unrighteousness behavior can cause economical imbalance and can also be a cause of antisocial behavior. Another was Agana Sutta of Digha Nikaya, which focuses on economical institutions which are emerged because of immoral behavior and which injects greediness and antisocial behavior. Another is Vyagyapaja Sutta of Anguttara Nikaya, where Buddha mentions four types of behavior that enhances economical progress. The first is earning wealth by doing professionally well. Second is saving. Third is having a social life and morally acceptable associates. And the fourth one is to have well balance between income and outcome, which is to earn money, but also to provide dana. And in Buddhism, giving dana, especially Dhamma dana, has been said to be at most importance. And another one is Kutadanta Sutta. So when I came across Kutadanta Sutta, I was basically quite shocked as to to understand what exactly Buddha has said, because until and unless till now we know that Buddha has mainly focused on ethics and mainly focused on principles, but in this sutta we get to know that Buddha has a very well understanding of finances and economics as well. So in Kuttadanta Sutta it is mentioned that so during this Buddha's time there was a princely state which was going through an economical crisis. So the king asked his ministers to find some viable solution, but unfortunately his minister told king to perform rituals like sacrificing of animals or having havan and so on and so forth. But one of his minister Kuttadanta, whose name the entire sutta is based on, was not in agreement with it, because he did understand that even after performing all such sacrifices and all such havans, there is still increase in poverty. People are still dying, and there is still an antisocial behavior like stealing and killing still happening in the society. So he then went to Buddha to ask for his opinion. So Buddha advises him to provide capital, loan, and open market salary fit for expenditure. So if one engages in public and private sector to produce more and goods and services. So this entire genesis of Buddha's understanding of economics and how the entire accounts and finance work tells us that Buddha has not only focused on ethics, but if ventured into more Pali Canon and Theravada Buddhism, we might come across a lot of such aspects which can be used as a thesis to capitalism. And this surely confirms that he possesses a vast understanding of economics. So the example I provided are just few. There are millions of documented instances in Pali Canon that speaks of it, and even if not directly, but as Buddhism is based on empirical realism, we can connect it easily. The another one is Paticca Samuppada. Now, Paticca Samuppada is a philosophical terminology within Buddhism. However, if used in economics, it gives a very proper sense to it. So, Paticca Samuppada is also known as dependent arising, dependent origination, and conditioned co-production, codependent origination, and so on and so forth. And if it can be used in economic decision that we are taking today, it can be said that whatever decisions we are taking are conditioned to future happening or events and process. So it also speaks about conditionality of the existence. So this same Paticca Samuppada, interdependent teaching, all conventionally designated individuals, says that things are in not reality metaphysically independent or self-contained and beings, but process is happening, and that events is simultaneously happening at a given moment in flux and flow of complex networks of interconnectedness. And this same philosophical ideologies has also been taken by many Greek philosophers, who speaks about interconnectedness and who speaks about how the entire complex nature of events and processes happen. So if considered well in economical perspective, we do understand that such kind of economical system has a very major implication of how our decision can impact the future generation, and not just future generation, but the entire society and the entire micro and macro economy as a whole, which also can be linked to karma, or in Pali we say it kamma, so the law of action. Now, there are these are again just few, and there are a lot spread across Pali canons. So now, if we glance into more exactly what is the difference between Western economics and Buddhist economics, to understand or to grapple the entire thesis as to why Buddhist economics is necessary and why Western economics cannot solve the current issues, is because, first of all, the entire concept of growth in Western economics is calculated by, of course, GDP and GNP, which is gross domestic product and gross national product. So in a nutshell, what GDP and GNP speaks about is that Western economics want us to believe that the production is the ultimate aim to sustain an economy. So if you are not producing well enough, or you are not producing more and more, the economy cannot be sustained. So this is something which we are told as an economist, and which economist wants us to believe that this particular system happens. However, if we see in a more intrinsic way that the growth which we say as GDP and GNP, it does include variety of aspects, like for example haircut, it does include sales of alcohol, cigarettes, machineries, car, it includes government governmental spending, it inflicts consumerism, fast food joints, advertisements, pollution, and all the big buildings that are constructed compromising the environment and compromising the habitat is all the major factors of GDP. But the things that actually values are not considered in GDP. Like, for example, the level of education, the literacy level, the women empowerment, healthcare, free press, freedom of expression, and so on and so forth, which actually matters, is not considered is not included in Western economical concept of growth. And it also focuses on profit maximization. So to have a profit maximization, to have more and more money, we come across economics of scope and economics of scales, which focuses on how the overproduction should happen. So once the overproduction happens, we know that it fuels consumerism, and the entire cycle of dukkha, what Buddha said as one of the four noble truths, starts without understanding the means to end it. So, whereas Buddhist economics, if we talk about it, focuses more on Buddhist ethics and is considered as moral phenomenology that focuses on relative and ultimate reality of how people engages in the world. It also focuses on moral development. So, although Buddhist ethics addresses more complex dilemmas and irrationality, unlike Western economics, whose main policies are based on assumption that humans are rational, which is inherently flawed, Buddhist economics shares the same interest as Western economics on profitability. However, it also keeps the fundamental Buddhist values to solve many tangible human issues. So, Buddhist economics do speak on production. It does speaks on consumption. It does speaks on wealth and accumulation of wealth, but it rejects the idea of overproduction. It rejects the ideas of consumerism, overconsumption, and overutilization of natural resource. So it rather focuses on middle way, moderate production that foster community well-being and welfare over individual profits and individual gain. So if we see that Buddhist economics efficiently understands the cause and condition, the interconnectedness of the entire society and the entire economical system, how it should happen, and it takes environment, society, and individual into one umbrella when it makes a policy or when it makes something which is long lasting. So, in a nutshell, if we see what exactly is Buddhist economics, so we can say that we can consider it as a social dimension that cannot be isolated. So it isn't just concerned with the individual happiness and growth or private destiny, but rather it is focused on interconnectedness and interconnected lives and consequences of all beings. So this is an holistic approach, emphasizes the intrinsic link between the personal liberation and well-being of society as a whole. So now there has been a lot of development over the years in Buddhist economics. So a lot of scholars try to link Buddhist economics with quantifiable Buddhist economical model. For example, the new price model, which focuses on price and time. But Buddhist economist has focused it on law of action and heart of millionaire. That is how much you give and how good your actions are when you perform it. There are certain studies which focuses on macro level impact, where it focuses on what kind of government policies should be to ensure that people are people are having good well-being and good life, which again comprises of Buddhist principles and Buddhist ethics. There has been few studies in micro level which are mainly in South East Asian countries like Vietnam, Thailand, and Sri Lanka, um, which does speak about how small and medium-sized enterprises or small businesses can use ethics or taken by Buddhism. However, there is still a lacuna when we speak about the gap in Buddhist studies, that there hasn't been any empirically analysis done to foster or to say that Buddhist economics does actually work. And when we say about Buddhist economics, we speak about model because economics is all about model, and Buddhist economics unfortunately do not have any model as such for the current time, for the current 21st century, because there hasn't been made any. However, also Buddhist economics does speaks philosophies as one of the major intrinsic part. So economics has always isolated philosophy because economics has made sure that the economics has a step ahead of philosophy because it speaks about, of course, numbers and statistics. But there are certain economists and philosophers who do believe that philosophy and economy should go hand in hand to ensure that there is an actual good economical system working. For example, Amartya Sen, so in his work in 1987, Ethics and Economics, he does focus on that every economist should study economics. Because again, Martha, who was also a friend of Amartya Sen, by the way, in 2015 says that economics was born out of philosophy. So you cannot actually separate economics from philosophy, which we see in Western economics, where we have so much focused on economics and so much focused on Western philosophical context that we do not that we have forgotten the entire original roots of economics or original origination of philosophies. So when we speak about Buddhist philosophies, we divide Buddhist philosophies into three halves. So the first is the metaphysics, ethics, and epistemology. So when we speak about the metaphysics of Buddhist economics, we speak that there is something which lies between the extreme of extremism. So it speaks basically about the middle way approach, that no one has to be extreme when any particular policy or any working has to happen. There is something which lies, and it is an annihilation. So there is a no self when it comes to metaphysics. Second is the ethics. So when we speak about ethics, it is again between the extremes of sensual indulgence and aesthetic mortification. It is about how exactly we perceive our action, good or bad, righteousness or unrighteousness, and how we explain it. And the last one is epistemology. So so epistemology is basically, again, it is between the extremes of ignorance and conventional belief as to what is said and what is thought, but what is not true. So Buddhist economic philosophies and Buddhist economists do focus on philosophies as well. It does not isolate as Western economics, because it takes an holistic view into consideration. So this philosophies plays a major role in economics, and especially in Buddhist economics. So whenever a model is formed or whenever an empirical investigation has been made in Buddhist economics, philosophies and sociology, as well as the natural state of environment, plays a considerable role, and therefore it cannot be neglected that Buddhist economics cannot be a new paradigm, or it cannot be an antithesis to capitalism. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Mronal. Uh, we will proceed further, and those who are in the session today, they can write down their questions for Mronal, and we will take them up at the end of the presentation. So, okay. Okay. So thank you, Mronal. I think she has done a wonderful job of putting across the ideas, contemporary ideas about the Buddhist economics. And she has provided us with a very solid foundation to build upon what I'm going to talk about: Babasaheb Ambedkar's vision for enlightened democratic socialism for perfect justice for all. And as we have been seeing in the past sessions, that there is so much unexplored in the writings and speeches of Babasaheb Ambedkar. If we look at them or study them very closely, we can find a lot of content that we can unpack for the times for today. So, this is, I have been talking about that Babasaheb Ambedkar was very closely associated with Buddhism for a long time. And in fact, he told Rahul Walapola that he was a Buddhist at the age of 16. And we have seen his references when he was writing the economic history of the India, particularly with the point of view of ancient India. He talked about the Jatakas, and he built a kind of a picture of how the commerce and trade was taking place at the time of the Buddha. So we can see that he was from very early on interested in Buddhist sort of this aspect of Buddhism. And as we know now, that he has studied all different facets of Buddhism. You name the school and you will find the books in his library. And he went on to construct or talk about philosophies based on Buddhism. And his very important contribution lies not only in reviving the Buddhism in the modern India, but also to make Buddhism relevant to the modern times. And he has done it very meticulously, linking Buddha's teachings with the modern issues and the problems. And we have seen in the past 5 sessions as to how Babasaheb Ambedkar had a very deeper understanding of economics. And we have seen that he was thoroughly grounded in the economic history of India and world. In fact, the courses that he took in Columbia University, they speak volumes of his engagement with the economics. And we have seen how deeply he dwelt onto India's public finance and its history throughout thoroughly, and his vision of financial decentralization was taken notice of by scholars of the time. And we have of course seen monetary economics, his views on the history of Indian currency and how that became the textbook to understand the monetary history of India, and it led to the institutional changes as well. And we have seen how he contributed to the economic development, the growth of India. He initiated several multi-purpose infrastructural projects like Damodar Valley projects and Hirakund Dam and so on and so forth. And in the fifth session, we have seen his total vision in its entirety, and we termed it as a democratic socialism, which has to be created by the law of constitution. A very innovative sort of initiative that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar thought would help India. So democratic socialism is, of course, if we look at it from the other vantage point, it's a Buddhist socialism, and it was, we can say, it was his ideology or philosophy that can create a framework for liberty, equality, and fraternity. He was to make economic rights as the legally enforceable fundamental rights. And he advocated, as we have seen in the previous sessions, a triangular framework of political democracy, state socialism, and law of constitution. In his thinking, as we know, justice is the bundle of three values of liberty, equality, and fraternity. And the Buddha's Dhamma, according to Babasaheb Ambedkar, is perfect justice. That's what he says in the Buddha's Dhamma, which ensures three values of liberty, equality, and fraternity. And Babasaheb Ambedkar has said that his social philosophy is based on the teachings of the Buddha. And in one of his letters that is not yet published, he's talking about his preference for the humanistic Buddhism over monastic Buddhism. And in his address to the Kathmandu audience, the WFB conference, he talks about there is a need to bring radical changes in the organization of Buddhist Sangha, the communism. He says that it's a communism in a sort of a microcosm of a communism to become effective and relevant in the modern world. So I think that these are some very important concepts in Baba Saheb's writings and speeches. And he talks about his philosophy of life in his address to All India Radio on October 3rd, 1954, where he talks exclusively about his positive philosophy, social philosophy. And he says it can be enshrined in three words: liberty, equality, and fraternity. Let no one, however, say that I have borrowed my philosophy from the French Revolution. I have not. My philosophy has roots in religion and not in political science. I have derived them from the teachings of my master, the Buddha. And this last part is very instructive because it was this particular broadcast, his speech was delivered in 1954. This last paragraph is very, very interesting and instructive for us. Says, my philosophy has a mission. So it's not, he was not an armchair philosopher, as we know that he was a very pragmatic philosopher. He wanted to bring real changes in the world. And this particular sentence is very instructive when he says, my philosophy has a mission. I have to do the work of conversion, for I have to make the followers of Triguna theory to give it up and accept mine. Now, this last sentence is very pithy, and it gives us a lot of instructions in terms of how we can construct the economic theory based on Buddhism, and also the modern concepts like constitution. He says Indians today are governed by two different ideologies. Their political ideals set out in the preamble to the constitution affirms a life of liberty, equality, and fraternity. Their social ideal embodied in their religion denies them. And we can see the dialectical tension between what Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar wanted to do and the realities of the Indian social and economic life. So, he speaks very clearly about why do we need Dhamma. He talks about the government and Dhamma. He says the society needs both the magistrate, government, or regulator. I just inserted this word regulator because, some of we can derive that meaning from it. Government and the ethical system, Dhamma. While the government regulates the minority, the Dhamma is for majority. These are very pithy sentence which needs a lot of, unfolding to get at the sense of what Baba Ambedkar meant by them. And he talks about, we can now talk about the three sort of conceptions of Dhamma, because Dhamma word has been so ingrained in the cultural history of India, and now as the scholars are pointing out, that it was Ashoka who gave it a very broader universal application of it for in his times. And his Dhamma can also be equated with the governance, because that's how he spoke about Dhamma as well. And of course the Dhamma of Babasaheb. They are not, of course, different Dhammas. They are like how we can apply them in the context or the situation we find ourselves in. And of course, Babasaheb Ambedkar talks about the Dhammarajya, the right as governance. And I found it is very pithy and insightful when he categorizes the Dhamma into Adhamma, Sadhamma, and philosophy of Dhamma. I just put it in order to show the kind of extent of understanding of Babasaheb Ambedkar had, particularly about Buddhism. And as we know that he dwelt very deeply, he has studied the Pali Tripitaka and all sort of books that he laid his hands on. So, of course, Ronald gave a wonderful presentation talking about Buddhist economics. I'm not going to repeat what she talked about. And, this is what he is about, Schumacher, and, Buddhists on Buddhist economics, like Payutto, Venerable Payutto, Mrinal has talked about him. But there is another interesting figure, Buddha Dasa, who wrote a book called Dhammik Socialism. And he was a great master in the modern times. And he talks about Buddhism, Buddhist economics, Dhammic socialism as non-attachment, community and cooperation, ethical leadership, and spiritual dimension. I just put these scholars across in order to have a comparative chart of all these great thinkers that we have been talking about. And you see the core concepts of all these four great uh, people. Baba Ambedkar is, of course, we can summarize his uh, core concept as Buddhist socialism. Schumacher, of course, as Brunal said, small is beautiful. One of the founding principles of Buddhist economics that Schumacher talked about, and I personally found it very interesting, is when he talks about with minimum consumption, maximum utilization of a human potential. And I think this idea is inbuilt in the thinking of Baba Sambhag. He always talks about the human capabilities, human potential, how caste system denies the development of the human capabilities. The kind of approach with Amartya Sen took later on, and he won, of course, Nobel Prize for that, developing the concept of human capabilities. And of course, Payutta's sufficiency economy and Buddhadasa's Dhammic social are very important core concepts. And of course, Mrinal talked about the Paticca Samutpad, and we see this in the writings of all these great people. And of course, they talked about consumption and justice. They all four were concerned about justice, and there are critical points. They were critical of some of the aspects of capitalism. So I just put this chart across to have a comparison between these great thinkers. So there is another scholar who is now emerging, and she has written a very beautiful book called Buddhist Economics, and it's very updated sort of a version of, I would say, Buddhist economics, and it's subtitled as An Enlightened Approach to the Dismal Science. It's a very wonderful reading, and she talks about these very interesting concepts, like Buddhist economics is built upon broader models, including those known as asymmetric information, because there is a asymmetry in information. And not all the social groups have the same information. And the market is, of course, based on who is having what sort of information. And that's the field where Joseph Stiglitz, one of the philosophers, or the economist, who comes very close to thinking of Baba Ambedkar. He has won the Nobel Prize in what is called the information economics. And we can see these patterns of how the skewed information or the information belonging to one particular group of people can lead to the several economic problem, or the you know accumulation of the wealth in the hands of a few. These are all modern concepts, the information economics. And of course, there is a behavioral economics. Brunal has touched briefly upon the choices or choice theory, and how we are not just rational beings. There are so many things. Our views are biased. Of course, people. Daniel Kahneman has won the Nobel Prize in that field, behavioral economics. He talks about it. Consumers are not rational decision makers. Relative income, a very innovative concept where the individual preferences depend on social norms and comparing one's income to others' income. So it's relative income. We are always thinking in terms of the relativity. And of course, altruism is a very core value, which sometimes the capitalist model of economy denies to the human beings. And we have seen in the previous sessions as to how market failures leads to the imperfect market. The market is never perfect, and therefore the free market has to be regulated and governed so that it can have the benefits to the people. So market failures, one of the examples is firms don't pay for pollution, and most industries are not competitive, but are controlled by a very few firms. We can see this monopolistic sort of behavior in the economy, even Indian economy today. Like more than 50% of the market cap is it belongs to only the 10 families, as we know. And of course, Amartya says human capabilities, people's ability to function in their daily lives, determine their well-being. And there are many new concepts that are emerging, like well-being and the happiness economics. Like we can look at that in the context of Bhutan, and of course moral hazard, where the financial firms reap profits without bearing the risk of failure. So these are the new models which are being developed now, financialization and abstract model constructions based on the equations that most of the people cannot make sense of. And but they govern the economic systems, and they, as she says, that the financial firms reap profits without bearing the risk of failure. So she says, Claire Brown says that the Buddhist model builds upon these extensions of economics to end up with very different outcomes and policies from the free market model. I found it very interesting. Some of her thoughts about climate change and bearing on various aspects of the free market are very interesting for our concern. And Elinor Ostrom, she was the first woman who to win the Nobel Prize in economics. So she says that economics is not all about greed. That's like self-interest is at the heart of it. Even Adam Smith, if we read closely, he's not all about the he talks about the monopoly, how it can distort the market. He talks about indirectly the externalities as to how the pollution created by the industries have impact on the third party. So it's not that Adam Smith, though the founder of the framework of capitalism, is not he's aware of the dangers to the free market. And look at Eleanor Ostrom, where she criticized the tendency of economists to design institutions for entirely self-interested individuals. And instead, she argued a core goal of public policy should be to facilitate the development of institutions that bring out best in humans. And she studied the communities in Nepal and other parts of the world, where she says that cooperation being between human beings is a key for the overall economic, social, and political well-being. And he says that people together, if they cooperate, they can manage scarce resources in various cultures. And she has demonstrated through her research work the evidences for that. And she won, of course, the Nobel Prize for it. She's the first woman to win the Nobel Prize in economics. So these are so important concepts that we have to bear in our minds, as we know that Babasaheb Ambedkar, we can term him, you can call him. He's talking about all these concepts before the dawn of the framework of Buddhist economics, as Mrinal has shown how Schumacher, I think Babasaheb's mentor, Seligman, asked him when he went to Germany to meet this German economist. And one of the names that he mentioned was Schumacher, as we have seen in the previous sessions. And I'm just, putting it across that we can term Babasaheb Ambedkar as somebody who has, initiated this kind of the economic concepts. And though he explicitly didn't talk about the Buddhist economics or the Buddhist politics, we can of course construct these models based on his understanding of various things and the practices he had. And we know that he was not just theoretician, he was somebody who also practiced. And we can see the fundamental changes that he brought in the labor laws in the country, the way he thought about the integrated projects that will benefit not just one particular group of people, but it will also benefit the farmers and the other section of society. And we know that he conceived the idea of quote unquote Buddhist economy with the view to end the structural dukkha. And I think these are his innovations that we need to now look at very carefully as to what he meant by the structural dukkha. And Babasaheb Ambedkar, of course, conceptualized, social dukkha as a structural dukkha apart from personal suffering and existential suffering. These are like the very insightful readings of Babasaheb Ambedkar into Tripitakas and the Buddhist philosophies and the Buddhist texts, because he dived very deeply into the ocean of the Tripitaka, and he brought out wonderful ideas that we can develop further. And of course, Babasaheb Ambedkar's economic philosophy we have been talking about. I'm not going to repeat it all the time, but some of the very interesting things are like he talked about the experimental means and methods. He said that the economic theories cannot be fixed. They depend on the time, the context, and the situation. So he had this sort of an experimental mind, and without having recourse to sticking to one particular ideas or ideologies forever, he was somebody who would experiment with different ideas and see how they impact the world. So I think this is very interesting sort of a notion in his philosophy, to find out the experimental means and method. And the last point about conflict and dukkha-free society with the reclamation of human personality at its core. And that's what some of the economists are talking about, putting the human personality at the center of the economic model of development. So let's go to, these are some of the questions which are very interesting. Can there be a middle path between capitalism and communism? Because as we have seen that both offer some kind of advantages and disadvantages, in terms of means and methods. I'm not going to dwell much into that, but Babasaheb Ambedkar, we can in his writings we can find out how, Babasaheb Ambedkar was, for an individual, but he was not for individualism. He was for fraternity, of course. He wanted to have a community that will have, he of course placed the highest premium on the value of fraternity. He says that without fraternity there cannot be liberty, equality. And I think that's a very profound concept, because all over the world people are, talking about liberty, but they don't know how to have a liberty without, compromising with fraternity. And in the scope and the scheme of Baba Ambedkar's thinking, we can see a lot of these brilliant ideas coming into play to explain to us as to how individual can be secured from the onslaught of the society, but also how individual can become the basis of the social progress. So, I just put this across to, have a food for our thoughts as to can there be a middle path between capitalism and communism. And I thought, it's very interesting idea that Baba Ambedkar has delivered a speech in Kathmandu. And that was a time when the whole world was in the grips of what is called the communism. All the Buddhist countries were following the path of communism. You look at the our history of the world, particularly Southeast Asia, and we see that all, including Burma, it was later taken on by the socialists, and there was a military coup. And same is the case with Korea. We have seen it Vietnam, and Cambodia, in China. So that was a time where the Buddhist youths were turning towards communism, and Baba Ambedkar had delivered this very important speech. And I thought whether we can play this. We have this clip available to us, and it's very interesting if we can play. And I will try to play it for a while, so that we can directly hear from the master. So let me put that up. So let us go to that. Oh no. Wait. Just give me 1 minute. So I thought we can play that clip here, because that's very, very interesting clip.
That I was to speak here. And when I was asked what subject I would speak on, I mentioned the subject of ahimsa in Buddhism. But I find that a large majority of the people attending this conference are desirous that I should speak on Buddhism and communism. Although I must say that I am not quite on the spur of the moment prepared to deal with such a large, enormous, and if I may say so, a very massive subject. A subject which has held half the world in grip. And I find that it has held also in its grip large number of the student population, even of the Buddhist countries. I look upon the latter aspect of the matter with grave concern. If the younger generation of the Buddhist countries are not able to appreciate that Buddhism supplies.
हम पिछले 5 साल से आपको बेस्ट क्वालिटी का A to घी खिला रहे हैं और अभी तक हमारी जो पैकेजिंग रहती है वो इस टाइप की हाफ लीटर
A way of life which is better than what is supplied by the communist way of life. Buddhism is doomed. It cannot last beyond a generation or two. It is therefore quite necessary for those who believe in Buddhism to tackle the younger generation and to tell them whether Buddhism can be a substitute for communism. It is then only that Buddhism can hope to survive. We must all remember that today a large majority of the people in Europe, a large majority of the youngsters in Asia look upon Karl Marx as the only prophet who could be worshipped. And they regard, I need not say much about it, regard large part of the Buddhist priesthood as nothing but yellow periods. That is an indication which the bhikkhus must take up, must understand, must reform themselves in order that they could be compared with Karl Marx and Buddhism could compete with it. Now with this introduction, I propose to give you a few salient points in Buddhism and in Marxism or communism, in order to show you where the similarity of ideals lies, where the differences arise between Buddhism and Marxism, and thirdly, whether the Buddhist way of life of reaching the goal which communism has is a lasting one, or whether the communist way of bringing about the goal is the lasting one. Because there is no use in pursuing a certain path if that path is not going to be a lasting path. If it is going to lead you to jungle, if it is going to lead you to anarchy, there is no use pursuing it. But if you are assured that the path that you are asked to follow is slow, maybe devious, maybe there are long detours, but if it ultimately makes you land on a safe, on a sound ground, so that the ideals you are pursuing are there to help you to mold your life permanently and forever, is much better, in my judgment, to follow the slower path and the deterrence path rather than to rush up and to take what we call shortcuts. Shortcuts in life are always very dangerous. Very dangerous. Now let me go to the subject. What is the theory of communism? What does it start with? Communism starts with the theory that there is exploitation in the world, that the poor are exploited by the rich because of the property that they hold, and they enslave the masses. That enslavement results in suffering, in sorrow, in poverty. That is the starting point of Karl Marx. He uses the word exploitation.
Most people think building a personality means wearing an expensive watch and carrying branded outfits.
What is the remedy that Karl Marx provides? The remedy that Karl Marx provides is that in order to prevent poverty, suffering of one class, it is necessary to prevent private property. Nobody should possess private property because it is the private owner who appropriates or misappropriates, to use the technical language of Karl Marx, the surplus value which the worker produces. The worker does not get the surplus value which he produces. It is appropriated by the owner. And Marx asked the question, why should he? Why should the owner misappropriate this surplus value which is produced by the effort of the working man? His answer is that the only owner is the state. And it is because of this that Marx propounded the theory that there must be the dictatorship of the proletariat. That is the third proposition that Marx enunciated. That government must be by the exploited classes, and not by the exploiting classes, which is what is meant by dictatorship of the proletariat. These are fundamental propositions in Karl Marx, which are the basis of communism in Russia. It has undoubtedly been expanded, it has been added to, and so on. But these are the fundamental propositions. Now let me for a moment go to Buddhism and see what the Buddha has to say about the points made out by Karl Marx. As I told you, Karl Marx begins with what is called exploitation of the poor. What does the Buddha say? How does he begin? What is the foundation on which he has raised the structure of his religion? The Buddha too, 2000 or at any rate 2,400 years ago, said exactly the same thing. He said, there is dukkha in the world. He did not use the word exploitation, but he did lay the foundation of his religion on what he called dukkha. There is dukkha in the world. The word dukkha, no doubt, has been interpreted in various ways. It has been interpreted to mean rebirth, the round of life. That is dukkha. I do not agree with that. I think there are a lot of places in the Buddhist literature where the Buddha has used the word dukkha in the sense of poverty. Therefore, so far as the foundation is concerned, there is really no difference at all. It is unnecessary for the Buddhist people to go to Karl Marx to get that foundation. That foundation is already there, well laid, well laid. It is the first proposition with which the Buddha begins his first sermon, the Dhamma Chakra Parivartana Sutta. Therefore, those who are attracted by Karl Marx, I say study the Dhamma Chakra Parivartana Sutta and find out what the Buddha said. And you will find sufficient satisfaction on this question. The Buddha did not lay the foundation of his religion either on God or on soul or anything supernatural as to that. He laid his finger on the fact of life. People are living in suffering. Therefore, so far as Marxism or communism is concerned, Buddhism has enough of it. And the Buddha has said it 2,000 years before Marx was born. And how do you, after persuading people, by persuasion, by moral teaching, by love.
So as you can see from his speech, he goes into the depth of a lot of concepts, and he talks about the ways and means of the Buddha as to how to end the suffering, and he talks about the Panchashil, he talks about the Noble Eightfold Path, he talks about Paramitas, and he gives a very innovative exploration or exposition of Nirvana. And if we see his speech, or if you read what he wrote in the Buddha or Karl Marx, it's a very interesting study, and it goes at the fundamental concepts of Buddhism as to how we can find the end of the suffering. So let me continue with my presentation. Where is it? Okay. Wait. Cancel. Sorry about this, because we have to toggle between a lot of ideas, and but I hope you will find something of value in there. So you see, we have seen Babasaheb Ambedkar's ideas about how he talked about communism and Marxism, and he has gone in showing how the ways of the Buddha are long lasting, and how they can bring about real equality in the society, which was a concern of course communism. And Karl Marx was not an ordinary person. He was, of course, the philosopher of capitalism. If anybody wants to understand capitalism, his book The Capital is very interesting, and he's now known as the philosopher of capitalism. And Baba Ambedkar, of course, saw, as we have seen in the speech, as to how the poor are exploited. And Baba Ambedkar saw in the industrial city of Bombay, where he lived with the laborers and working class population. He himself declared as the leader of the working classes, as a labor leader, even when he was making a presentation for the reforms in the monetary system of India. So he has, of course, seen enough of capitalism, and in one of his speeches, he has said that the laboring class in India has two enemies: the capitalism and Brahmanism. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to focus on, Baba Sahib Ambedkar's conception of dukkha, because I think it's very fundamental to understand Baba Sahib Ambedkar. So, Baba Sahib Ambedkar has analyzed the dukkha in a very interesting manner, and I find his understanding very interesting today. Is that, according to Baba Sahib Ambedkar, Kapila, who was the founder of Sankhya philosophy, used the concept dukkha in the original sense, meaning unrest and commotion. And dukkha, as originally conceived, had a metaphysical meaning. Metaphysical is something that cannot be grasped by our senses. It is beyond our material senses. So, in other words, it's extrasensory. In other words, this conception of dukkha of Kapila, who is sort of the first philosopher of India, as we can say, like this, all these neo-Brahmanical concepts or the Brahmanical concepts, they find their origin in Kapila's Prakriti and Purusha. But I'm not going to go into that. But that's how Baba Sahib Ambedkar has talked about Kapila's conception of dukkha. But that's what Baba Sahib Ambedkar says, that our day-to-day experiences are informed by senses and experienced by senses. Baba Ambedkar further commented that later on the word dukkha acquired the meaning of suffering and sorrow. The two meanings were not different, as unrest brings sorrow and suffering. Further, Baba Ambedkar elaborated that the dukkha acquired the meaning of sorrow and suffering from social and economic causes. I think this is a very interesting way of looking at the word dukkha. Because a lot of the times, in the traditional Buddhist context, we see three kinds of dukkha. Dukkha, that is dukkha, dukkhata dukkha, like toothache or body ache, or sometimes it's called the dukkha because of the change, viparinam dukkha, and sankharik dukkha. Generally this is the conception of dukkha in the traditional Pali text. But also there is a lot of scope to construct the various, the how the dukkha is, uh, you know, uh, talked about in the Buddhist text. For example, Mrunal was referring to Kuttadanta Sutta, and one of my Sri Lankan friends who died, Nalin Soris, he has written a very wonderful book on Kuttadanta Sutra, where he talks about the Brahmin as a sharp tooth people, the bloodsuckers, they are vampires. Like Kutadanta literally means the sharp teeth. And this there are so much to go back to the Pali Tripitaka and study and bring out very innovative ideas, as Baba Ambedkar has done in his reading of the Pali text, where he talks about dukkha, acquired the meaning of sorrow and suffering from social and economic causes. And Baba Ambedkar goes further on talking about the dukkha, that dukkha is material and not metaphysical. I think these are very insightful, and it can irk a lot of traditional Buddhists when Baba Ambedkar conceptualizes that. But if we look at the traditional Buddhist countries which have gone into the grip of the communism and created so much mass of the suffering, if they had looked into Buddhism, they would have found a better option than communism. That's what Baba Ambedkar is saying. That there is enough in Buddhism to create, the new models, the new theories, the new practices to, bring about communism. He says that the Buddhist Sangha is the greatest example of the communism in the world, the complete abolition of the private property. But unfortunately, that didn't happen, and that's what Baba Ambedkar was directing the attention of the Buddhist countries towards. And Baba Ambedkar critically analyzed the formulation of the first truth, dukkha, in the Four Noble Truths. According to Baba Ambedkar, the Buddha in his first sermon said that birth is sorrowful, old age is sorrowful, death is sorrowful. That's a deeper pessimistic coloring has been given to his Dhamma. And this is what Baba Ambedkar says. The formulation of dukkha, according to Baba Ambedkar, is the rhetorical tool of exaggeration to produce an effect by skilled literary hands. As in another sutta, the Buddha preached that birth as a human being is very precious thing. The Buddha has said, up to number of times that, to get the birth of a human being is very precious. So, and the Buddha spoke of existence of dukkha to emphasize the duty of removal of dukkha. So, Buddha didn't talk about the dukkha in isolation. He said in Pali many times he says that I only teach two things: the dukkha and the end of dukkha, dukkha and dukkha nirodha. So, this is what Baba Sahib Ambedkar's very interesting study. He says that the reason the Buddha left the ashram of Alar Kalama, who was the disciple of Kapila, was that Kapila only stated that there was dukkha and said nothing more about it. So these are very interesting readings of Baba Ambedkar, and Baba Ambedkar, as I told you, conceptualized various sort of types of dukkhas, and I'm just going to jump onto that. He talks about individual dukkha, personal suffering which arises due to one's own unethical behavior. So he said the remedy is to practice Panchashil. Social dukkha, of course, he talks about interpersonal suffering which arises due to inhuman social, economic, cultural, political structure. And he says that the solution lies in practice and propagation of the noble eightfold path. And natural dukkha, of course, like natural calamities and all, we cannot do much about it. So the Buddha tried to find solution to social dukkha as well. As we can see how he was critical of the existing structures of the time. He was critical of the Varnashrama Dharma. He was very much critical of the exploitation of women. He was very much critical of so many structural things during his time. He was critical of the practice of the yajnas and the yagas, which created so much suffering for the animals. So, these categories are not mentioned in the classic Buddhism, but we can, of course, find out in the Buddhist text that the Buddha has also described poverty as dukkha. He has talked about the itti dukkha, the dukkha of being a woman, and he has talked about a lot of structural sort of things in the society. So just to talk about a little bit about social dukkha, it is a dukkha caused by the unjust social, economic, and political structures that create social stratification. And in the very first sutta, the Buddha talks in the Brahmajala Sutta, the Buddha talks about 62 wrong views, and he says that the Buddha encourages study of the views and separating right view from the wrong views. So this is a part of the practice that Baba Ambedkar has recommended. And Mrunal was referring to Paticca Samutpad. Baba Ambedkar had a very interesting reading of Paticca Samutpad. There are different variations of the formula of Paticca Samutpad. And in the Madhupindaka Sutta, the Buddha talks about the social strife as to how they come into being based on the clinging, craving, and grasping and all, and how that leads to the social conflict, how that leads to the structural dukkha, how that leads to the the mass of suffering. And this is what Baba Ambedkar has talked about in the Buddha and Dhamma, page 58 or 588. He talks about the sutta where Ananda extols the Paticca Samutpad as marvelous. The Buddha goes further in praising Paticca Samutpad. doctrine of event arising from the causes as essential for removal of suffering. It's also the part of the process philosophy. Because Babasaheb Ambedkar believed in the process philosophy. He didn't believe in the substance philosophy, that there is anything essential, foundational element to the world. And this is what Babasaheb Ambedkar has talked about. Craving leads to grasping. If there is no craving, there is no grasping. And this is a formulation of the Paticca Samutpad that is very relevant to our understanding of how, the Buddha talks about the ending of the suffering in the society which arises due to the conflict. He says craving leads to grasping, grasping leads to pursuit of gain, and it leads to desire and passion. It leads to tenacity, holding on to something. It leads to possession. Then it leads to the greed, more possession, and then keeping watch and ward over possession. Wicked things like blows and wounds, strife, quarreling, slander, and lies. That's how this conflict in the society, strife in the society emerges out of holding on to the possessions. Very interesting formulation of the Paticca Samutpada is present in the classic Buddhist texts. And this economics has to be committed to ending the structural suffering to create happy and peaceful communities. That's what Babasaheb Ambedkar glosses over. He says that if there would not be the love of private possession, would there not be peace? These are the questions Babasaheb Ambedkar raises. And this is from Mool Pariyaya Sutta, Babasaheb Ambedkar quotes. And it's a very interesting sutta that talks about how the vision of an enlightened one develops. So I recognize the earth as earth, but I have no craving for it. You see the craving, the grasping, accumulation of material possession, as to how that leads to dukkha. And Baba Ambedkar, when he went to Burma, he was very much astonished by looking at the rectangular roads in the villages of Burma, and he said the Burmese people do not hold on to the property land because they know that sabbam sarvam anityam. He talks about this in one of his speeches, and it's very interesting idea that because the Buddhist in Burma, he says, they practice the Buddhism, they hold on to the idea that nothing is permanent. So they don't mind if their land is, used for building constructing the roads, which are very beautiful and rectangular. And to end with what we are supposed to do. And as we have seen that Baba Ambedkar never ennobles poverty. He says that, there we have to have the material wealth, but he says that more important is not just to have the material wealth. What we need is the teachings of the Buddha coming into play in the world, to be activated in the world, to bring about justice. And justice, as we have seen, is about liberty, equality, and fraternity, the three principles which cannot be separated. And he says that in only Buddha's teachings we can find that these three principles can stay together. And I think this is very interesting a way of looking at the Buddhist economics, because it covers larger contours, and it brings Buddhism in dialogue with the Marxism, and it shows what is lacking in Marxism. And also, we have seen in Baba Saheb's actual practice of economics, how he tried to make the common man at the center of his economics, how he tried to make the welfare of the public at the center of his economics, how he tried to remove the information barriers between the communities, how he tried to make sense of the psychology of the people. And I think this may not be the topic for today, but Buddhism offers a lot in particular areas of the mind. And we can of course look at the Buddhist models of minds, and that is what has been studied now in terms of the biases that human beings face in behavioral economics. So I think there is enough for in the writings and speeches of Baba Ambedkar, and in his actual practice of economics, that we can describe Baba and liken him with the grandfather of Buddhist economy. He was somebody who brought these ideas, articulated them, and talked at length, particularly in his very interesting speech, Buddha or Marx. And I think if we look deeply into the text, the Buddha and Marx, we can find a lot of things that make sense today. So I will end up here, and I will open up the session for any questions or any discussion on what Mrunal said and what we followed thereafter.
Jai Bhim, sir.
Jai Bhim.
Prashant this side.
Yeah.
Sir, as Mrunal ma'am had mentioned about the Buddhist economics, so somewhere I have read this Bhutan measures the economic progress by something called GNH, Gross National Happiness.
Yes.
So is that also like derived from this Buddhist economic? Is there any relation between that?
Ronald, would you like to answer this?
Oh, yes, definitely. So, regarding the Bhutan's gross national happiness, it is also stated in one of the Amartya Sen's article about Buddhism that most of the aspect of Human Development Index and GNS has been taken from Buddhist principles. And GNH, that happiness is one of the major, I think, parameters of growth or success which Buddhist economics feels about. So yes, Bhutan's GNH and self-sufficiency model of Thailand, as well as the Human Development Index, has a very important role in Buddhist economics.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
So any comments by anyone, or anybody would like to, elaborate on what we have just spoken or presented to you all?
Sir.
Umesh bhai.
And my question first with Dr. Monal. Do you think that the economics that we are discussing over here around the globe have impact, means economics is getting affected by the religious mindsets? Means all the countries are having different faiths, and how much it is contributing to the economics?
Well, to answer this question, there has been some studies of economics related to Islamic finance or Islamic economics. There has been also studies on Christianity, Christian economics. However, in globally, they haven't. There isn't much of a difference, or there isn't much of a change. We can see the impact of Islamic finance because there are countries who are mainly focused on Islamic and they are using Islamic finance model in their day-to-day life. However, when it comes to Christianity or Buddhism or any other religion per se, these are currently mere a theological solution and mere a theological understanding, because no religion has equipped enough to empirically prove that their principles are principles can be used in this generation and in this society. Also, when it comes to Buddhism, there has been a debate in academia saying that do we really have to call this particular economic model as Buddhist economics model, because again we are linking it with a religion. But there are also Buddhist scholars who refuse the idea that Buddhism is not a religion, it is basically the educational system. So there is still an ongoing debate. However, it is that Buddhist principles and Buddhist economic model, whenever comes into picture, it will of course have a shift in the current global economical system.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a profound thought. Doctor, what is the way ahead, Mangesh bhai? What is the way ahead, and how means we are having a lot of burden on our shoulders, or rather, I say burden, not burden, responsibility to carry forward the words that Babasaheb Ambedkar has just uttered in his speeches, that clip you have saw.
I think we should go back to the writings and speeches of Babasaheb Ambedkar, because as a community we have been accumulating his works and books and decorating our houses with that, but we are not really grappling with the ideas that are there in Baba Saheb's scheme of things. And even if we like to understand Baba Saheb Ambedkar as an economist, we have not done it. I think very few people have engaged with his ideas of economics. And as we have seen in these 6 sessions, that how much scope there is to really articulate these ideas for our country today. And I think this articulation is very important in terms of creating new ideas and applying them in the today's context as to what Baba Ambedkar would do in terms of the climate change, how he would respond to, because these the climate, they talk about the climate justice, who which communities will be more impacted due to the climate change. These are the very fundamental questions that are raised. So I think what we need to do is we have to have this uh, deeper understanding of Baba Saheb, because he was somebody who has had a very unique tool to analyze something. He looked at the past, and he understand the pattern, and he saw how we arrived at where we arrived at and how we can bring the change. And this, I think, is a very important thinking tools for us to understand what has gone wrong or right for the Indian economy after Baba Saheb Ambedkar left, what is happening today, and how we can bring Babasaheb Ambedkar in dialogue with what is happening in India today. And as we have seen in the previous, I think in the session 3, as to how when they talk about the monetary economics or monetary policy, the bill that has been there, the act that is they cite in the report that followed it in 2017, they cite Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, that they are walking on the path of Babasaheb Ambedkar in terms of his thoughts on monetary economics. And I found it very interesting that people are talking about Babasaheb Ambedkar today, but I think as a community, we need to really, really, really articulate and understand. I think before we articulate something, we need to understand, very deeply how Babasaheb Ambedkar has thought through about various problems, and how we can bring him in conversation with what's happening in the world today, particularly in our country today, in terms of ideas like what is happening in education policy, what is happening in terms of the responsibility of the state, how whether the state is responsible for the masses. If not, if it is not responsible for the masses, how we should articulate Baba's vision, how we talk about it more and more. I think it's more about finding the right ideas and advocacy. We have to advocate those ideas, talk on different platforms. So maybe Mrunal would be able to add to it.
No, I think I reckon your idea, and so basically such series where we speak about more of what exactly Babasaheb's idea is, with a variety of different streams when it comes to law, economics, or even for politics. I think it is very much necessary for us to have that and to understand that, as well as to hear it, because I mean, let's be honest, we don't read as much as we should be. So such things creates attraction, as well as such things creates a stir among what exactly his ideas are, so we can communicate more about it.
Very profound. And I think we should follow the simple formula that Baba Sahib has given to us regarding unite, educate, and then agitate. Thank you so much, Dr. Sahib. Sadhu, sadhu. Thank you so much.
Anybody has anything to say before we end today?
Hello.
Hello. Yes, Pradeep ji. Prandeep ji, yes. Hello, Prandeep. Okay, I think we have gone on. Our session has been longer, as I cautioned you at the beginning of the session that we would go about half an hour extra today.
Are you getting me? Hello.
Yeah, Prandeep, please.
Yeah. So I just want to tell that, as you have shown that the difference between capitalist economy as well as Buddhist economy. So I just want to say before that India is a mixed economy, as you know it. And don't you think the economy which you had shown is religiously biased? First question. Secondly, there is an issue going on at Bodh Gaya Mahabihar complex regarding Bodh Gaya Temple Act 1949.
Yeah.
The committee composed of, like you also know it, according to BT Act 1949, 9 members are there in the Bodh Gaya Temple Management Committee. Out of that, 4 are Buddhists, 5 are non-Buddhists. They may be Brahminic Hindus or XYZ.
This question, Prandeep, is this question
community.
related to economics, this one?
Yes. Yes, I'm bringing it. So since the country is struggling with freeing it, the Bodh Gaya Temple Committee in 1949, how is it possible in practical sense to implement Buddhist economy in this situation?
Okay, that's a very good question. There is a very interesting study that says that people are inclined to religions. I didn't believe that finding, but when I found it, I was a little bit shocked that most of the people in the world believe in religion, and the percentage is very high. There's something in human psyche that makes us believe in religious ideas. I don't know what is that. Maybe we have to ask the people who study the psychology of the religions. But Buddhism, in this context, as we have seen, we can see in the discussion that Babasaheb Ambedkar had in the Buddha and his Dhamma, where he talks about religion and Dhamma. And this idea of Dhamma is so entrenched into the Indian culture that we talk about the Dhamma all the time, or Dharma all the time. And now, as I said, the scholars have been saying that the idea of a Dharma as the universal ideal ethical system has been given by Ashoka, and after that there was a counter to the idea of Ashoka, the idea of Varnashrama Dharma, which came into being after Ashoka. So, like this idea that there has to be some basis for the societies, there has to be some basis for the economics. I think it's ingrained in the psychology of our country, I think. And then we have to launch our inquiry into what does it mean by the Dhamma. So Baba Ambedkar says that it's not the religion per se religion. And as the scholars are saying today, the concept of religion per se is like not very old, 200, 300 years old, when the Western thinkers started talking about religions. And, in no way Buddhism qualifies as a religion. It has no god, no soul. It, of course, it had organized monasticism, but in many terms, it was never called a religion in the traditional Buddhist countries. It was called Buddha Sasana, or by other denomination. This word religion was not there because it integrated with all the aspects of the individual lives, in particular Sri Lanka, in Burma, in Thailand, in Japan as well. They acted like a quasi-governmental structures, and such was the case in India as well. The vihars in the past, the vihars were like the main hub of governing the economic and social lives of the people. There are evidences now, archaeological evidences. Like, for example, the banking system was well developed by the Buddhists that time, and that's how they could build the big structures like Ajanta, Ellora, and all. And in China, Danhuang Cave, they found the records of how the goods and the merchandise were accounted. And some of the scholars reckon that the first use of the zero as a numerical placeholder appears in the Buddhist manuscript found in Bakhshali in Pakistan. So, these are all interesting ideas. I won't look at Buddhism as a religion, and I wouldn't try to convert people, but there are ideas, and I think the ideas have to be examined whether they are coming from any source. That's what will be the attitude of Baba Ambedkar, to examine ideas coming from any direction, to weigh them, to see whether they can be applied. And same is true about Buddhism. We have to look at those ideas and see whether they are relevant. If not, if they don't work, we don't have to go according to those ideas. So I would think that we have to look at Buddhism in terms of like people can call capitalism a new religion as well. There are people who call capitalism with its own god of profit making, and like today we have the prophets of capitalist, right? All over the places where they talk about the individual sort of monopolizes the complete system. Like there have been some interesting writings about this Elon Musk being the god of capital. So you see, these are all words, and we have to hunt for the ideas, whether they are in Buddhism or in. So that would be the attitude of Baba Ambedkar, to really go after the ideas and see whether they are relevant. And he found many ideas in Buddhism which are relevant today. That's why he showed India this path, that let's look at the Buddha, look at our own sources as to how we can have a better society. I know that doesn't answer your question, because it's loaded question, and I won't. But I think what I said talks about our approach to different ideas coming from anywhere. So anything on this before we end? So I think we have come to the end of our course on Ambedkar economics, and personally I found it very enriching for me to explore the ideas of Babasaheb Ambedkar, and I thought that we should end this course on economics with Buddhist economics, because I think we have to articulate Babasaheb Ambedkar more and more. And in the world, all over the places, in my experience, people sometimes they just put Babasaheb Ambedkar aside even as a Buddhist scholar, but there is enough in his writings and speeches, shows his deep understanding about everything there was. And same with economics, as we have seen that he was a very, very deep economist, was a practitioner of economics, and he has done so much good to our country. And I thought it would be pertinent to end this with Buddhist economics. And we had Mrunal today, who talked very profoundly about the Buddhist economics and comparative thoughts of different thinkers. So with this, I think we have come to the conclusion of a course, and I think we have had a wonderful journey so far. So, Minal, before we conclude, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you for having this session on Buddhist economics. And yeah, I think the question and answers were quite enriching. There were a few questions in chat as well. But yes, I think there was a very good discussion, and there should be more such topics which should be discussed in a panel.
So with this, we conclude, and we, as I'm announced in the group, we will have several courses which we will be running in the course of time. So thank you all for joining in, and I would like to thank Nikhil, who has been anchoring our sessions, and he has been wonderful sort of a coordinator and organizer. So thank you, Nitin, and thank you all for joining in, and see you in the next sessions like this. Thank you all. Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
sir.
sir. Thank you so much.
Bye, sir.